So I have a colleague named Rashawn. Rashawn and I work together in an after-school program where we help elementary school kids achieve grade-level reading by the end of third grade. At the beginning of the last school year, Rashawn and I overheard a teacher talking about a potential student in our program. And that teacher said, "You don't want that one. He causes too much trouble. You can't really teach him." Rashawn looked at me with anger in his eyes and said, "I want that one." He was 15 years old. Reach Incorporated, the organization I run, hires high school students who have experienced significant academic trouble to be elementary school tutors. Through the process, elementary school students gain access to targeted one-on-one instruction, and the high school students get experience working on foundational literacy skills in an engaging and empowering way. Both groups tend to experience pretty significant reading growth, sometimes dramatic. So why does it work? Part of it is the model. It's the only way that we can give high school students access to elementary school content in a non-stigmatizing way. But that's actually the easy part. The hard part and the powerful part of what we do is that we put teenagers in charge. And we do that in three important ways. The first of those ways is that we get to know our kids. So we aim to honor a Ted Sizer quote that says, "You can't motivate a student you don't know." Our kids are teenagers, which means they tend not to tell you how much they appreciate you. They tend not to tell you how wonderful you are. Often the flowers of the seeds we plant, we don't see for years. But in those moments when our hands are dirty and we feel like we're working with just rocks and thorns and weeds, it's in those moments that we have to offer those teenagers what my friend Neil Phillips calls buckets and buckets of love. It's in those moments that we have to help them see the them they don't yet know. We have to show them potential they don't yet understand resides within them. One of my students entered foster care in the 9th grade. Now, adolescence kind of sucks, and foster care kind of sucks, but the combination is pretty brutal. And in her lowest moments, it was really important for us to be able to remind her that she was a charismatic hero to a bunch of our most rambunctious 3rd grade students. We had to be able to help her see herself through their eyes and through our eyes when she was having trouble seeing herself. The second key to what we do that I find pretty important is we fight against the hypocrisy of grit. I know this is dangerous because everyone loves grit these days. And we know that the only way kids can be successful is if they don't quit and if they keep at it and if they're gritty. But my students come from all over DC. They come from shelters or the rooms in relatives' houses or the couches of their friends. And they walk to school in the cold without jackets to fill their stomachs with food they don't get to choose. Along the way, they often drop off younger siblings because mom's mental health challenges or substance abuse problems or second or third job prevent her from doing it. But then after all those things, they show up to school. And then when that stress becomes a little much, and when that tension becomes a little overbearing, sometimes they lash out. Sometimes they curse or they fight, and they do things we don't want them to do. So we suspend them, or we expel them. So who's not gritty, the student or the school? We make a simple commitment to our tutors. You will not be fired. Sometimes they test us, but it's our job to figure that out. Stefan's a 9th grader at Blue Senior High School in DC, and he is very, very well known to the administrators. He causes problems in the hall. He causes problems in the community. He's not on any of his teachers' favorite student lists. But when he comes to work, he's a different kid. He works with these 3 really tough 3rd grade boys that love him to death. And if you walk through their elementary school during the day, you'll hear their teachers saying to them, "You better get your act together, or I'm going to tell Stefan." And it works. In those moments, when Stefan is given the opportunity to mess up and know that he still has a place to come back, he soars. And even on those days when he gets suspended, which still happens, he shows up to work because he values the relationship with those kids. We have to focus a lot more on organizational grit and a lot less on individual grit. And that brings us to the third thing, because it's only after those first two that we can even start talking about academic content. And the third thing that we do, a place where we put our focus, is we trust teenagers with a real responsibility for real outcomes that matter to them and to us. We have our kids as elementary school tutors, which means we trust them with the futures of children. When a tutor has a bad day, a student suffers. When a tutor doesn't show up to work, a little kid sometimes cries. These are real risks that we take, and sometimes our kids fail, but sometimes they succeed. Joyce was in 9th grade when she had a particularly challenging 2nd grade student, and I turned around during a tutoring session one time and saw Joyce on her phone. You don't get on your phone during our tutoring sessions. So I went over, angry, to tell her to put her phone away. I got a finger in my face, at which point Joyce calmly handed the phone to the 7-year-old she was dealing with and said, "I was talking to her mother. She said she was going to get me fired." As we listened to this 7-year-old utter a couple, "But moms," Joyce went on and said, "It seems there's a new baby at home. I think she just wants the attention." I had walked over to her angry when she was doing exactly what any reasonable adult would have done in that situation. But the trust we have for our tutors doesn't end in our tutoring sessions. Most of our teens noticed that the books we were reading with their kids didn't really represent their realities. So we could have written a blog post on diversity in children's literature. We could have also worked to diversify our own children's library, and we did both of those things. But we also did something else important. We told our kids that we desperately needed their voices. So this summer, we published 4 brand new children's books, authored by 15 teenagers from the District of Columbia. We've now sold or distributed over 2,000 of those books, and our teens have fans. And those tiny fans, when they think of what a children's book author looks like, they picture the faces of teenagers from the District of Columbia. It's a pretty awesome thing. Our teens need to be in charge of their own education. And in order to do that, they actually need to care about the product. Shockingly, with the kids we work with who have experienced so much academic failure, Carnegie units and state accountability systems just don't do it for them. So we can support these teens taking control of their education in these 3 important ways. We have to stick with them when they fail, not just academically, but behaviorally as well. We have to seek to know them and know a version of them that's beautiful even in those ugliest moments. And we have to trust them with real responsibility for real outcomes that matter to them and to us. Because if our success is tied to theirs, we're not going to let them fail. And by doing that, we have the opportunity to take these young people in these challenging situations, and we'll produce a group that when they see our society's most difficult problems, they'll look at them and say, "I want that one." Thank you.